Welcome, everyone, to the Contact Center Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And we have a very special guest on here today, Henry Hildesheim. And Henry, you are the Director of Operations for TechStyleOS, but you actually have a really interesting background. For over 15 years now, you've been working on both the corporate side, running a contact center. You've also been on the BPO, the partner, the outsourced side. So those two kind of internal and external perspectives is really important for what we're going to be talking about here today. Because we're going to talk about the inside out perspectives of creating a contact center success. What are the challenges internally and externally, and what are the factors of success in bringing and merging both of those together? So I'm very excited about our conversation here today. But before we get started, I'd love to just give you a chance to maybe explain a little bit more about your background.
Of course. Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. Really excited about this opportunity tonight. And a few sentences about me working for TechStyleOS as a director of operations and customer service with a background that determined very much my view on the things. On one side, I'm a true believer in having people, valuing people, managing people the right way. On the other hand, very much believe in numbers. Every decision that I make needs to be backed up with numbers, which makes me a person who has a very nitty-gritty micro view on numbers, not getting along with averages very well, for example, which is something that very much determines our industry, and doing everything for the best of our customers, of course, taking all this information. So that's very much me.
Well, great. Here's what I'd love to do. I'd love to start out just ask you a really important question, which is, how do you look at the challenges of running a contact center, connecting that to the overall success, the growth of the business? There's internal challenges and there's external challenges. I just wanted to know how you think about that.
I think I'm not telling any secret if I say that a BPO contact center partner and the partner that asks for that service, they usually have a little opposite interests. The BPO partner needs to make money with the service that they're doing, while we, TechStyleOS, as somebody who uses contact centers, want to get the best and the most out of the money that we're paying. So this is one of the conflict lines that we're seeing, and this is also what you can observe as very different from working inside a BPO versus working with that partner who requests BPO services.
I'd love to ask you, though, definitely different organizations, so different growth strategies, but you come together as one team. So I'd love to ask first, what are your recommendations on how you ensure you find the right BPO partner and that you bring them together inside of your organization so that you are one team servicing one customer base?
One thing, and this is how we're coming back to the people, one thing that is important is to speak to the people and to make sure you're building a connection internally and externally, seeing your partner as an extension of your own organization, not in a technical way, but in a very human way, so that they feel responsible for your success as well as you're, to a certain extent, responsible for their success.
A good strategy. And what I'd love to do is I'd love to ask you about how you actually make that a reality. I'd love to even hear a story about how like you work with your BPO partners, or from when you were in a BPO partner, how that organization made that happen. Because it's a good goal to have, but actually making it happen and merging two different companies and two different company cultures and having exist as one team, because absolutely you want the customer to feel like they're interacting with your company no matter what. You want the BPO partner to feel like a part of your company and take ownership and pride in that. But how we get that done and making sure it still aligns with the BPO partner's business model and strategy, how do we do that? Because that's not always an easy process.
Absolutely not. It's definitely effort. It's effort in communicating with each other, taking the time to speak above and beyond not only the numbers, but also how emotions go about certain situations, how partners or ourselves feel how close we're getting to a goal. It's of course always asking for more both sides, but it's also remaining humble enough to accept a no and to accept the reason for a certain thing, to allow time for development. And last but not least, to meet people in person. And I'm not speaking about the account manager who you want to meet in person. I'm speaking about meeting operations managers, meeting team leads, trainers, and not only meeting them for lunch, but really sitting next to them while they're working, have an open ear. And beyond all those people that I mentioned, this applies to our agents because our agents are our face, our voice to a customer. They're our front lines. And if we're expecting them to be exactly that, then we also need to take care of them. Exactly as I mentioned, as if they were our own employees.
So here's what I'm taking away from that is that we can't just have the goal and the strategy from on high and say, this is how we want you to work with us, whether you're our own agent or our own agent with inside of a BPO partner as part of the team. But you've got to spend time together and you've got to learn and you've got to establish a connection between you running the contact center and your agents and the operations and the agents of the BPO partners. If you want them to feel a part of the organization, you've got to create a human connection, a relationship with them yourself. Is that a good takeaway from what you're saying?
That's one of the most important things because that relationship is the foundation for respect for each other. It's the foundation of when you ever know within a partnership to stay optimistic, to spend effort, sometimes even above and beyond to get things back on track.
Now, I could understand intuitively the benefits for you as the director of operations, but that takes time. That takes you a lot to do in your day. So you're shifting priorities and you're putting that human element is much higher now on the list in terms of your priorities, where you're going to spend your time, what you're going to do. In your own words, why? What is the benefit that you get out of it? And not holistically, they're going to feel a better part of our organization, but tangibly, you're held accountable to KPIs. You've got to run a successful operation. Why do you invest that much time?
If my partner knows me and if they know what I'm striving for and if they commit to it, and this is what I'm trying to achieve with that personal connection, they would invest into that, knowing this is how they can make their partner happy. This is how they can make me happy. They would probably go above and beyond when it comes to achieving certain metrics, reaching certain KPI goals, because they know, okay, this is what makes Henry and this is what makes TechStyleOS successful. Just only be for our own benefit. It takes load off my shoulder because I can rely not only on internal resources, but also on my partner's resources to be innovative, to see things that I don't see and to give me a heads up without charging me for a heads up. And that way be quicker, be ahead of the competition, and also be a role model inside the whole industry.
The one big theme to what you just said there was, to me, was like investing in those relationships, spending that time gives you the trust that they're going to work hard on your behalf and be happy to do that. That you can trust that they're going to be doing the things that you want them to do as if you were doing it yourself. But if you're not going to invest in that time in that relationship, how can you trust that you're going to get that kind of a reciprocal partner mentality coming back at you? Is that a good way to think about it? Like a good articulation of what you said there?
Yeah, it makes sense. And just one more thing on that. BPO is short for business process outsourcing. You could also say you're delegating part of your business. And if you're a good delegator, you make sure that people feel empowered. You do it as these people were your own employees, they're part of your very own team. And if you do not draw the line between a vendor and a partner too straight, but you make sure there is that feeling valued both sides, then you can do things that would otherwise not happen.
It's interesting because I'm doing a whole series and I'm interviewing chief people officers and chief human resource officers and then CMOs and CROs and CEOs about the importance of company culture. And it's really about creating engagement and having people feel like they're a part of the team and they're empowered so that they feel loyal and they stay longer and more high performance. Everything you just said is, to my mind, you're investing in the time to create the right culture between you and your BPO partner. So they feel valued, they feel a part of the team, and they want to do more work for you, and you can trust in that relationship. I keep asking this podcast because everything that you say, it's so meaningful, and I just want to make sure that I'm hearing it right. Is that a good way to articulate this? That you're basically investing in the culture and the working relationship between you and your BPO partners?
Absolutely. And there's lots of payback, not only from a very business point of view, but also from a cultural point of view. It simply feels different. Just imagine, see if you're seeing one of your partners, one of your vendors, and it's not only about a formal handshake. It's not only about having a lunch together or having dinner together, but really having the possibility to have in-depth conversations where nobody's holding back, because this idea is something I should share before I know what will be the ROI on it. This is what it creates.
So it's interesting. You brought up the idea of the dynamic between vendor and partner with the BPO. And a lot of BPOs feel like they're treated like vendors right from the beginning. The RFP process, and it's very, very focused on cost savings and don't mess up our CSAT scores and make sure that the customer feels like you're a part of us. But very, very cost driven, very, very savings driven. And that's not a wrong thing, but a lot of BPO partners feel like that's almost the only thing that's important. But you talk about the value of a BPO partner. How do you think about the balance of cost savings versus the value you want to get out of a BPO partner?
So there's two things on that. The first is most of the cost savings are driven by the company who looks for a partner because they can reduce contact reasons, they can invest in technology, they can provide a good customer service upfront. And what I mean there is they're selling goods to have a good delivery, they're providing services to have very good service quality. This is how you save the most, by not creating, not inducing. This is the first. The second step is to handle your resources efficiently. And efficiently does not mean you're only looking at an average handling time. It means you're taking a wider picture and you try to put a certain length of a contact versus a certain likeliness of a resolution versus an increase or decrease of a lifetime value of a customer. If you're focusing on the whole picture, it gets a bit more complicated in the first glance, but it helps you to make your company more successful and it helps you to save at the right point. If you're saving money, you're saving costs on the shoulders of your frontline workers. In my belief, it's not a good idea. Your frontline workers are so important as the voice of your company. They're so important that they stay for a long period. That's driving costs that very often you don't anticipate in the beginning.
Right. You could drive costs through, like, let's reduce average handle times. You can also reduce costs by having happy agents and agents internally in your BPO partners that don't turn, because that's a massive cost. It's a very good way to put that. So one of the things with BPO partners is that they have interactions with your customers every single day. The highest voice of authority in any business is their customer. So how much do you want to rely and make sure that it's part of that relationship, that they're constantly feeding back to you what they're learning so that they're helping to make you smarter on a constant basis? How important is that in those BPO relationships?
It is very important, but it's also a caveat thing, because when our customer service agents are interacting with our customers, then for them, it's very hard to filter which type of information is important and which type of information is less important. Especially if you have a situation where a very important thing, let's say a bug on a website or an issue with the product that you sell, if that occurs very rarely, like you have a certain number of agents and each of the agents maybe has one occasion during a whole work week, still, this can be a significant number of products or a significant number of services that is impacted. So that's why this is an area where we rely on agent feedback, but we're also relying on technology. This is where speech analytics plays a big role, where you can pull out certain things from conversations that the agents are leading, but they might not even remember.
You talk about technology, and technology is so important, not just because of AI, but data and understanding our data and really looking at those numbers and making decisions is really important. So I got two questions on that front. One is, tell us a little bit about your data strategy, how you think about data. And you had mentioned in a previous conversation that sometimes averages and benchmarks and things like that can be a little misleading. I'd like to hear a little more how you talk about that.
So I'm very much a fan of when you come taking that example of averages, I'm very much a fan of data clouds, which means I can see in a diagram, I can see different data points and how they're distributed. And that gives me a much better picture than just working with average. I'm not saying the average is not important. For any planning and forecasting team, it is very important. They have to know a little bit more. They also need to know how the values are distributed approximately, because that has an impact on the number of contacts that you can handle in a certain period of time, for example. But for my purpose, I really value working with either data clouds as the most granular, or at least working into different areas where data is located, how data is distributed, and so on. Working with quartiles, working with deciles, much more than I would prefer to work on flat average.
Makes good sense. And you've got to control that data. You've got a tech stack. Your BPO partners have a tech stack. How do you merge that together so that you're getting the right data? The technology is working seamlessly across your BPO partners so that you're getting all the data from all the customer interactions, whether it's your internal team or in your BPO partners.
Yeah. Technology wise, we're a bit special. We're not very much relying on BPO technology that our partner owns, but we're owning a big piece of technology. It's something I can only recommend to everybody who's working with a multi-partner environment, as they are then owning the technology, they're owning the data, they're owning the strategy. It's something that we're doing. So when it comes to giving data, grabbing data from different technology pieces, maybe from the ACD, from CRM, or from speech analytics technology, then it's very helpful to own the technology, as you don't also own the data and you own the message that you want to send.
So owning that data is hugely important. This is your own customer data and ensuring that. So the idea of working with a BPO partner, is it integrating from their tech stack into your data, or do you actually have them adopt your CRM system, like your tech stack, in order to work with you?
They're integrating into our technology. So the idea really is they don't have to invest much. I want them to invest in their people, on training and people management in general. That's much more important. That's also the area of expertise, and this is how we handle it.
So we've talked a lot about these BPO partner relationships, and you have a very unique background for being on both sides of the fence. So I think this is a great line of conversation. What haven't we talked about in terms of the relationship with your BPO partners that you think is important for us to share on the podcast?
There's a few things. One thing that I want to mention is, how do you make sure that the partnership retains or remains in a good shape, even though you're not on a growth path with your customer service side? Because the BPO, obviously, contact center obviously earns their money, earns with the scale. That's helping people a lot. On the flip side, if you're getting more efficient in your customer service, using technology, if you're using contact reasons, etc., that also leads into a situation where the partner has to accept that there's growth, or even during certain periods of shrinkage that will not be offset next season. And that's something that was difficult to manage, quite frankly, difficult to manage, because if you're working in a very international environment where you try to provide native language support to your customers, even if they're from smaller markets, you're getting into an area where suddenly the size of the team is not determined by the number of contacts anymore, but the size of the team is determined by minimum coverage on the service. This is costly, and then you're trying to be innovative in how can we make sure we're still providing top-notch service, but on the other hand, we're not running these micro teams, where it's also very hard if you have attrition. If you have leads for any reason, it's very hard to maintain service on a good level. How do we make sure it's working well? One piece of technology that we're using is automated translation services, which usually either the customer or the agent redirected what's happening. Just everybody's using their own language. And this is how you merge teams into bigger units again, the benefit from the economy of scale again. So that's one of the things that really poses a challenge, creates a challenge. I think for every type of company that runs a customer service, that is not like thousands and thousands of agents, but a reasonable and overseeing number and on very granular markets.
One of the advantages of working with a BPO partner is the ability to scale up and down as needed. But to your point, you have to acknowledge that has an impact on their business and then their relationship with you. But honesty, and that's a part of the business, is in that relationship and just understanding that there's going to be ups and downs in the business. And if you've invested in that relationship up front, I can only imagine that those conversations are easier to have and it makes for a long-term relationship, which both sides want, right?
I don't know if I can say they're easier to have because I'm not having too much possibility for comparison there, at least not during the same period of time. So you're not handling different accounts at the same time. But definitely it's helping. So what you invested in, it's helping you that your partner supports you in implementing new technology, even though that might be in contrary business interest. But it's something they know it's helping us to maintain the relationship. And it's also for us important. We want to maintain that relationship. So I'm making them part of that process. So again, it's working together. And it's maybe one of the lows that you go through, and at a different point, you're going to the high.
I've got one last question for you, Henry. We've covered a lot of territory here. But if there was one thing that you wanted the audience for the podcast here to take away from our conversation, the most important thing with working together as companies and BPO partners, what would that be?
Take the time and invest in people, and not only in your own people, but invest in all the people that are working for you and that you're working with. I think that's a source for success that also makes you happy in the way if you're going through highs and lows together. We're in Germany, we're saying shared joy is double joy, while shared grief is half the grief. And that helps a lot. That really helps a lot. And in the long run, it's sustainable and it's very likely much more efficient and fulfilling than doing short-term investments and disinvestments.
Well, thank you. Out of all the words of wisdom, I think you really put that succinctly at the end. Thank you. And I know that there's going to be some questions that come from the audience. And would it be appropriate that we gave out the link to your LinkedIn profile so people could get a hold of you?
Absolutely, no problem.
Fantastic. Well, I think that this has been fantastic. I think that the insights of the dynamics of working on those relationships is something that we probably need to explore a lot more in this podcast. But thank you for bringing all of your perspectives into it. It's extremely helpful. Whether you're in the audience and you're on the corporate side or you're on the BPO side, I think there's a tremendous amount that we learned today. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, once again for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.